Welcome back to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
Today, we're jumping into something really fascinating, a whole stack of documents.
Yeah, recently declassified government files. And what's really interesting is the source material itself.
Exactly. These are what? Scanned images, old records.
That's right. Handwritten stuff, typed lists, internal personnel info, contacts, routing slips. It's pretty raw, almost like finding someone's old notes.
Give you a real glimpse behind the scenes, doesn't it? So, what's our mission with these today?
Well, the idea is to sift through them, see what nuggets we can find. What do these names and notes actually tell us about how things worked back then?
Right, how information was managed in, let's face it, a very sensitive context. We'll look at the details, the connections.
And maybe understand a bit more about these kinds of declassified files generally.
Okay, let's get into it. So, digging into these personnel lists first, what hits you right away?
It's the sheer number of people, just lists and lists, names, addresses, sometimes phone numbers.
A real directory.
More than that, though, it feels like a snapshot, capturing who is who at a particular moment.
And it's not just like current staff, is it? I saw different labels.
No, exactly. That's one of the really interesting bits. You see red, for retired, obviously. Current employee, resigned. And contract employee pops up quite a bit, too. Like, Gunnar Beckman and James Angleton are listed with addresses, suggesting past involvement.
Angleton, of course. Big name.
Right. Then there's William S. Donnelly. He's marked current employee, but also deposed.
Deposed. That sounds serious.
It does. Suggests maybe removed from a position.
Eh?
And Alfred C. Drury is red, but they even list his service dates. DCSR 6, May 54, Mayor 61.
So they're tracking people long after they leave active service.
It seems like it. Keeping tabs, maintaining contact maybe. Important for historical knowledge or maybe ongoing consultations.
Makes sense. And you mentioned the scope. These people weren't just in Washington.
Oh, not at all. The global reach is really clear. It paints a picture of worldwide operations.
Any specific examples that stood out?
Plenty. James E. Delaney, Jim, noted as COS Bangkok. Chief of Station, almost certainly. That's a major role.
Bangkok, okay. Where else?
Daniel Flores is STA in Mexico, stationed there. And Tokyo seems to have been a huge focus.
Really? Tokyo?
Yeah, loads of mentions. George and Eleanor Breen are in Tokyo. Robert Hashima, Contract Emp, Tokyo. Robert Ujiri, also Contract Log 055, Tokyo.
Wow, quite a few.
And there's more. Howard Orr was there, 61 to 63. Leo Rosenbaum, 60 to 65. Peter Slobogan, 61 to 64. George von Bretzel, 63 to 65.
Long stints.
Right. And some of these guys, like Orr, Rosenbaum, von Bretzel, were interviewed much later in 1978.
So whatever happened in Tokyo stayed relevant for a long time.
Looks that way. We also see Kazuo and Doris Watanabe listed as Contract Tokyo. And Hayami Sato, retired, was there from 52 to 64.
That's a long time. Any other locations?
Yep, David Wilspit is down as Ret Mexico, and Jack Whitten is linked to Austria with a note contact via station. Interestingly, he was interviewed later in Washington.
It really maps out a network, doesn't it? Just these little annotations.
Absolutely. And some annotations are, well, more than just locations. They get pretty specific, sometimes quite intriguing.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, how about Jerome Jerry Fox? Right next to his name, there's this note. This is Man Walcott, identified as having told him Oswald was an agent. Dupe spoke to him in Florida.
Whoa. Okay, that's pretty direct. Linking a name on this list straight to Oswald?
Exactly. It just jumps out at you.
Wow.
Shows these aren't just simple personnel files. They contain potentially explosive bits of information or leads.
Definitely flags him. Any others like that?
Well, maybe not quite as dramatic, but still revealing. Priscilla Johnson McMillan is listed as an informant.
An informant, okay.
And it notes she was interviewed exec session, own attorney.
With her lawyer present. That tells you something about the sensitivity, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Suggests a formal, perhaps high-stakes interview setting.
Yeah.
Then you have Joseph Burkholder Smith, identified as Little Joe, author of Portrait of an Old Officer.
So they're noting his public profile as a book.
Yeah, it gives a bit of context to who he was.
Yeah.
And Shirley Stetson is listed as DCD STA chief.
Any idea what DCD might be? Directorate of Central Documents, maybe?
Could be. Suggests a leadership role within the structure, a station chief, perhaps within a specific directorate. Gives you a tiny peek at the org chart.
And sometimes it's just normal life stuff.
Right, like Royal Tyler.
My.
Reason for resignation on September 17th, 1965, to attend Columbia.
Ha! Back to school. Amidst all the cloak and dagger, someone just wants to get a degree.
Kind of grounds it a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But then you swing right back into the intrigue with the aliases.
Ah, yes, the aliases. Always fascinating.
And quite common in these lists. It's not just for show. It points to, operational security compartmentalization.
So who did we see using them?
There's one listed as Christ, a.k.a. Carswell Dan, with a note he was interviewed under alias by Carswell and Hardway. So interviewed using his own alias,
That's cool.
isn't it? Then Calvin Hicks used the alias Calvin Wiley Paul back in September 1963. William Kent went by Douglas Hampton. Guy Vitale used the pseudonym Geston Hugh C., starting way back in December 1956.
It really underscores the clandestine nature of things, multiple identities even within their own record keeping.
Definitely. Layers upon layers.
Okay, so that covers the who the people involved. What about the how? How did information about these people move around inside the agency? You mentioned routing slips earlier.
Yeah, the official routing slips and transmittal slips, these are gold, really. They're like the internal email chains of their day, but on paper.
Showing who talked to whom about what.
Exactly. They reveal the workflow, the internal communications. We see this exchange between a Susan Watkins, who seems to be initiating requests, and a Bob Baker.
Okay, what did they discuss?
Well, one slip from Baker looks like he was in FR Plans, maybe Foreign Relations, or a Plans division to Watkins dated March 29, 1978. That's a bunch of names.
More names.
Yep. Russell Brines, Claudio Benedil, Mary Ellen Scott, Gladys Sonati, Jose Manuel Berenger, quite a few. Some are marked possible, some resigned, some active.
Any standouts on that list?
Howard Houshing Chow is explicitly marked active currently NY, New York. That's very specific. Others include Walter Briggs, Enko Waters, Gerhard Diemond, Howard Susang Lee, Fred Zumi, Peter Nauer, Francisco Chen, a real mix.
So Baker is sending this list to Watkins for review.
Seems like it. And the next day, March 30th, there's another slip from Baker saying, and I quote, "This is what I worked out with Susan Watkins. She will review the subject files, and she will also call Tom Groford in contract personnel."
Okay, so they're coordinating. Watkins is digging into the files, and they're also checking with contract personnel. It sounds like an active investigation or review process in 78.
It really does. It shows a clear, coordinated effort to follow up on these individuals.
But then there's another note, right? Something about protection.
Yeah. This one's dated March 31st, 1978. It's a renoting sheet, again from Bob Baker to Susan Watkins. It refers to a phone call they had.
Okay.
He says he's returning the list she sent him for checking, and then writes, "I am only concerned about the protection of Howard Houshing Chow. He is a current asset of the NY base, New York."
A current asset. Wow.
Yeah. And he continues, "I would appreciate it if, in the course of revisiting any of the other names listed on the attached routing slip, you would protect Howard's as well. Many thanks."
That's incredibly explicit. Protect this current asset. It shines a light on the ongoing operational concerns, even when they're looking back at historical connections.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder that these weren't just historical records even in 1978. Some individuals were still active, still needed protection. It shows that tension between historical inquiry and present-day operations.
And this wasn't just pushing paper around. You mentioned interviews were happening.
Definitely. The files include an actual interview schedule from March 1978. They were actively talking to people.
Who was on the schedule?
Let's see. James Woods and his wife Louise, March 27th. Frederick Randall, interviewed March 24th, noted as a current employee.
Still working there in 78.
Yep. Raymond Swider, also a current employee, interviewed March 27th. Robert Pete Wheeler on March 28th. Thomas Keenan on March 24th. Frank Estancona, March 28th, also a current emp with an identifier X9439.
Any idea what X9439 means, like a department or extension?
Hard to say for sure, but likely an internal code, yeah. And Peggy Maggard, March 28th, also listed as current emp 1349.
So a real flurry of activity in late March 78 talking to current and possibly former personnel connected to these lists.
Precisely. Active information gathering, decades after the Kennedy assassination itself, but clearly still relevant to ongoing inquiries connected to the Records Act.
So wrapping this up, we've gone from what looked like simple, maybe even dry administrative records.
Right, just lists and slips.
To uncovering this really rich picture. Personnel management, global reach, aliases, internal comms.
And that really crucial point about protecting active assets, it touches on so many facets of how an intelligence agency operates and remembers.
It really does. These details, the names, the dates, the little notes, they aren't just footnotes. They seem to be threads that connect to much larger stories, much bigger investigations.
Exactly. They show the meticulousness, the long memory involved. Even seemingly minor administrative details can hold significant clues when you're trying to piece together historical events.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe. When you see this level of detail, this meticulous tracking and revisiting of names and connections decades after the main events, what does that suggest to you about the nature of these long-term investigations? How important are these bureaucratic breadcrumbs in finding our way back through history?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that sometimes the biggest secrets aren't in grand manifestos, but hidden in plain sight within the mundane workings of the system itself. Something to really think about.